Ready when you are.
Is the W116 actually worth restoring? A lot of people who owned 126s had 116s. They were in the family. They were ubiquitous cars. They served all kinds of purposes, whether they were taxis or upscale luxury cars or hot rods or cars that AMG tuned. But one of the things that I really find depressing in this day and age is the lack of W116s out there. And one of the reasons that this upsets me so much is because the truth about the 116 is that if you are able to get all of the weird nuances of the car resolved, in some ways it is actually a better car than a 126. Now, you didn't hear me say that, or did you? Now, the 116s that I'm particularly talking about are either the 300 SD. The 300 SD is a superb car. There are some things you have to do to it to make it an even better car. But I would call it a pretty difficult car to replicate in terms of comfort and you know, durability. But the cars that are often forgotten, the 280 SEs, the 450 SE, the 450 SEL, the 450 SEL 6.9, a lot of these cars have rotted away, and unfortunately there's really not a cohesive effort to restore them. And so one of the reasons that I wanted to bring up this discussion about the W116 and why it's such an important car to preserve is because Mercedes actually over-engineered certain features of these cars that in a way that you never really saw again, that translate to a pretty amazing driving experience. And so we're going to talk about some of these features in this video and why they make the 116 such a great car. Now, the first item that I think that you guys are going to be aghast that I brought up is that ACC2 automatic climate control. And many of you, when you hear me bring this up, they're going to go, why, Pierre? That system is not repairable. It's just there's no way to fix it. What on earth are you talking about? You must be crazy. But I beg to differ, and here's why. The first reason I beg to differ about the climate control in these cars is because if you pull the dashboard and you replace the diaphragms and the defrost and center vent actuators, and sometimes the recirculation actuators, although they're not very failure prone, suddenly all the dash vents work, and then you get better temperature regulation because air is blowing in the right direction. Yes, I know it's a very difficult job to do, but once you do that, you make sure that you solder in a new diode on the temperature sensor. You make sure that the servo is working. And by the way, you can buy a rebuilt servo from mbdiesel1.com, or occasionally you will find an NOS one. We have a lot of NOS ones in stock. You go through and resolder the contacts on the amplifier board. You make sure the system doesn't have any vacuum leaks. So, you know, if the vacuum lines get brittle from exposure to gasoline fumes in a gas car, you just replace them. Once you go through and do all these things to the climate control system, they have a bulletproof evaporator, a bulletproof heater core. I mean, we did have one car where the heater core and the evaporator rusted together, but that was sort of an anomaly. Once you rectify all of these issues, the AC system in these cars is actually quite good. It's not terrible like so many people would lead you to believe it is. It's not anemic like it is in a 107. And even on a 107, they can work pretty well if you follow all those steps. Another reason I like those cars so much is because of the front suspension. A lot of people don't know this, but the reason that the 116 provided such a structurally stiff and isolating ride experience was because of this giant beam that ran to the left and right side of the car that pretty much sits right underneath where the driver's feet are. The rear part of the lower control arm is attached to this beam, and because it's such a beefy lower control arm, they rarely get damaged in accidents or even from rough road driving, although they may need bushings once in a while. This particular design, which some people have colloquially named the ram's horn, makes all the difference in ride isolation, comfort, suspension stiffness, and limiting body roll in the 116. The cars absolutely do not drive like the 70s car that they look like. Another reason I like these cars so much is because they have an unusually comfortable and spacious interior. While you may need to repad the seats, especially the back seats, the interior of these cars allows for somebody like me, who's my size, to stretch out and comfortably relax. The dearth of wood, the exceptionally bright instrumentation, which you don't get on every 126, the seats that I think have better bolstering than 126 seats in some ways, the amount of headroom, all of these things sort of meld to produce what I would believe to be the superior driving experience once you get any issues straightened out. But we're going to talk about the mechanical package as well. Now, I've talked about the virtues of the 617 turbo diesel quite a bit on these cars, but I think that if you uprate the rear axle ratio to a 265 or a 288 on a 300 SD, you really capture the car's potential better. One of the biggest problems with the SD is they're wound up at 65 miles an hour. They're turning about 3,000 RPM. If you put a 265 ring and pinion in, which you can get from an SL 500, not the diff case, but the ring and pinion from an R129 SL 500, there are a lot of these out there, you can take those gears, put them in the housing, and actually build what I would consider to be a pretty nice highway car that does 75 miles an hour at 3,000 RPM. And because of the slip of the torque converter in those cars, it really doesn't affect acceleration. Now, my friend Jamie would beg to differ with me about this. He thinks you just have to leave the rear end in the car that it came with. But in Florida, where people do 80 to 90 miles an hour on I-95, it's really nice to have a car that you can drive 80 miles an hour in without forcing the engine into an undesirable rev range that could create excessive wear or burn excessive fuel. And in this day and age where we're trying to conserve fuel and limit emissions, keeping RPMs down is not necessarily the worst idea. Now, the V8 engines are a whole different story. While I'm not a huge fan of the 75 model year gasoline cars, while they can be made into decent engines, the 77 to 80 4.5 liter V8 is extremely reliable and smooth, and in this day and age of terrible gas, you can run it on 87 octane rec fuel. Same goes for a US market 6.9. Does not go for a Euro car. These are just a few reasons to love the 116. It would be nice to see more of these cars get recognized and saved for the great cars they are. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and tap the bell for notifications. We'll see you in the future. Thank you again.